If you're old enough to remember when phones had cords and the only thing that went viral was a cold, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Big 6-0 with Kaylee Harris and Guy Rawlinson. Because who better to discuss life's second act than two people who still think mature is a type of cheese?
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Big 6-0. I'm Guy Rawlinson, and with me, as always, my great mate and fellow time traveller from Epping West Public, Kaylee Harris. How are you?
Hello.
Now, this week we've got a topic that got me thinking. We're talking about those sliding door moments. The forks in sort of life's road where one decision leads to either the right or wrong outcome sometimes in life, and being in the right place at the right time can probably set your life on a different path, really, right?
Yes.
And I've had a few of those in my life. I look back, I think, now what if I had taken another job? What if I didn't move house, or said yes instead of no to something? And sometimes fate can just sort of take a hold too, right? I mean, do you believe in fate?
I don't know. I kind of being brought up as an Anglican, I guess. I don't tend to believe in fate. I tend to think that everything happens for a reason, from a higher purpose, I guess.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't know. Do you?
As I get older, I like to think fate probably has a hand in it, but I don't know whether that's because of your life choices and it finds you somewhere along the way. I don't know whether that's fate, whether that's a higher power, whether that's just coincidence. You read into it whatever you want, don't you?
I guess by handing it over to fate and saying that it's fate, then I guess you lose control, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you think everything happens for a reason and nothing you do is going to make any difference, then just let go.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Does that fork in the road? Does that then force you to make those decisions of your own? Well, is it your own free will? I mean, and it forces you to do something that you would normally just say, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Yeah, I think sometimes things happen in life that you don't expect, or opportunities present themselves that you don't expect, and all of a sudden you're faced with a conundrum. You know, what do I do now? Because this isn't what I expected. This life isn't taking me in the direction that I thought I was going. But let's get some examples. Do you remember? Can you give us an example of when you hit a fork in the road?
You know, a big recent fork in the road, and when I say recent, I'm going back half a dozen years or more now, was where I was working before. A whole bunch of, through no fault of anyone's, there were a whole lot of redundancies. My role was made redundant, and everyone listening will know the processes and the copy and paste emails you get about all that sort of thing. It's just the way of the world these days. Now, that was in December, just prior to Christmas, going back about 8 years ago now. My father was diagnosed with something, and he got
at the same time.
Well, he didn't really let on, but it meant that there was 6 months or more, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do in my world, And all of a sudden, I think this is the worst thing that could happen. Is sort of around at Christmas time. I'm now without a job after being with a business for a long, long time. What am I going to do? I'm over the age of 50, right? So I spent some time with Dad, all that sort of thing, and then he became progressively worse, and he passed 6 months after I was made redundant. Now, if I was still working, I wouldn't have been able to spend that 6 months of quality time with him.
Wow.
And not knowing what was going to befall either one of us, it happened. I look back at that now, and I don't say it's a blessing, but I think, my gosh, that little fork in the road, that little sliding doors sort of moment where, while I was looking for a job, essentially, I got to spend so much time with my father, not knowing what was going to be happening in 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
That's-
I think there are forks in the road, and we'll talk about more of them professionally. Forks in the road, plenty of those through life. But going back for me, going back to when I was a kid, I was born in Brisbane, and we moved. My dad got transferred to Melbourne for his job, so we left when I was 5. And we stayed in contact with the kids, some of the kids and some of the neighbours in Brisbane. And a lot of them sort of went on to stay in Brisbane, in the suburbs, married other people in the area, and never really moved out of there, never really travelled, never really did anything big and substantial like that. And when we would go back to visit them years later, they sort of seemed a bit stuck in suburbia, if that kind of makes sense. And I remember my mum saying to me she wanted my sister and I to sort of have a bit of a travel experience too, and it was tough, going. And then after Melbourne, we came to Sydney, and then we went to Queensland, and then came back to Sydney, and so we moved a lot. And as a kid, I was changing primary schools a lot, and forced to make new friends every couple of years because we found ourselves somewhere else. Now, whilst that might have been a bit hard at the time, I'm so grateful for that experience now. That my dad professionally was in a fork in the road that impacted the whole family when we moved. So that's probably my earliest memory of a fork in the road.
Yeah, it's almost a small town mentality. You see it in movies all the time, where and even when we look at Muriel's Wedding, where you've got Porpoise Spit, and everyone just lives in that little town. They live that world, and that's their whole existence, and they aspire to be whatever that their world can offer them in that particular environment.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, that's right.
That's fine. When we would go back and see our neighbours and stuff like that, they were blissfully happy. But yeah, it's just interesting how you could look at it from a different perspective.
That's right. Yeah. I look at an example, and it's not a personal example. That once again, I'll use my dad as an example here, where one of his best mates, the marble fell, and he went to Vietnam. Now, that whole conscript thing of you got 3 months training and off you go. Now that changed his world. He came back, but not the same person. After spending time in Vietnam and fighting that war. So that was something that was beyond his, all of a sudden there he is one day hanging out with his mates.
And that's not something he gets a choice on if it's conscription.
That's right. Yet that marble fell, I think it was, in an episode we had with Tim Webster, he was saying he was lucky that the date of birth that happened to fall wasn't his. Unfortunately for this man, he did, and he had to go. So his life was changed, and it was changed subsequently after that because of that fork in his road, because he came back a different person altogether then, and it was noticeable. And, fortunately, ourselves, we've never had that sort of situation. But personally, there's a lot of other forks in roads and sliding door moments. And yeah, as you say, whether it's you're landlocked in a particular suburb area, whatever, you can be blissfully happy. That's your world.
Yeah.
But travel, for example, and you love your travel. Have you ever been somewhere where you've been off the beaten track, or you've just found something or somewhere that you didn't expect to find while you're away? Or
I went to this is probably in my 20s. I went on a holiday overseas to see some family over in the US, and on the way stopped off in Hawaii, and I absolutely fell in love with Hawaii. I thought, oh my gosh, I want to live here. I'm coming back. This is the best place in the world. I just loved it. It had such a great vibe to it, and I wonder now what I tried to get my green card and sort of started to make inquiries down that road.
Oh, you tried to get your green card? Or you did? Yeah.
No, I didn't get it.
Right, okay.
I started to make inquiries about
sure.
it, and then one thing led to another, and I think, my dad became sick and it didn't ever happen. But it makes me wonder what would have happened had I up and moved to the US in my 20s. And speaking of, I think we talked about this in a recent podcast as well, that something I wanted to do if I wasn't doing now was be an air hostie. And I wonder now, because I went for the interviews at Qantas and, Ansett, I think it was, when Ansett was a thing. And I got to the third interview and a girlfriend she went through it with me. She got through and she was flying for years. I got to the third interview and bummed out and didn't get the job. And I was so convinced I was going to get it. I've got quite an outgoing personality and everyone told me that's what they're looking for, and I just was convinced I was going to get it. And then I didn't get it. And I had my whole life in front of me of flying and all those sorts of things. And then it didn't happen. But then, I went into, I was in radio at the time and the radio career took off. Now, that would never have happened had I been flying.
But it would be another set of experiences. And is it an older thing that we go through that we say, what if? Or, do 8-year-olds say, I wish I had done that? Or is it an older thing where you say,
I think it's an adult thing.
Yeah.
I think you probably start doing the what ifs in your 20s maybe or your 30s.
And is that because the grass is greener in your mind's eye? Or what is it?
You have the ability to be able to look at other situations when you're starting to make big life decisions like, getting married and having kids and things like those big moments. Then I think that's when the what ifs start to come in because you think, okay, well, what if I don't have kids? What if I don't get married? What if I marry somebody else? What if I, leave this marriage? I think that's when you start to see, is the grass greener? And you know what? Most of the time it's not.
Yeah, it's another one of those DeLorean time machine moments, isn't it, where you start to say, and sometimes in your mind's eye, great.
Yeah.
But in reality, are the paths that you end up taking or you choose to take, are they the ones you're meant to take? What do you think? Are they the paths you're meant to take?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think those things happen for a reason. And we talked, like you said before, is it fate? But I think those things happen for a reason. And I think when you are presented with a fork in the road in your life, it's a really good time to reflect. And, why is this happening to me now? Why have I been offered this job now? why have I been diagnosed with an illness now or somebody I love has? And I think it gives you an opportunity to, I guess, value life and reassess and not get too comfortable with where you were going. Because maybe where you were going was not the best. And maybe this has happened for a reason and you can't see it at the time, but it will become obvious over time why that happened. Like you said, retrospectively with your dad, you look back and go, okay, I can see now the benefit of that. Even though at the time you would have been devastated being made redundant. But where is this leading me,
Mm-hmm. And grandkids, they offer a lot of forks in the road too, don't they? Because if you choose to have kids, lucky enough to have kids or whatever, you make connections through them as well, and that can take you on different paths and different journeys, and then all of a sudden grandkids are another case in point, and all of a sudden they steer your direction a whole lot of the time too. Have you ever had any situation with your kids or them growing up that all of a sudden you're a mum and what you were thinking was going to be part of your world all of a sudden has to do a 90-degree or a...
Well, probably the most obvious one and the biggest one was my marriage breaking down in 2007. And, I thought you get married and you stay married and you're married for life until death do us part and all that sort of stuff. And it didn't work out that way, and it was a really tough couple of years. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, I'm not Mrs. So-and-so anymore. I'm now going to be going back to being single and navigating life as a single mum. That was probably the biggest fork in my road, I think, in my life to rework out what does that mean and how do I be that person.
Because relationships, they're big forks, aren't they? Just in themselves, and where they take you, and you sometimes question it.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether you question it at the time. Or once again, do you just look back?
Well, when you look at the stats and half of marriages won't work, there's so many people out there going through the same thing. 1 in 2 people, it won't work for them. And I know someone who's just gone through it recently, and after being married for 38 years, and
wow.
My heart breaks for her. But is it a chance to reinvent yourself? Is it a chance to I can look back now and I can see why the marriage didn't work out, and I can see my part in that. And I think that, this brings me to the person I am today. So it's not entirely a negative fork in the road. It can be a very character-building fork in the road, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever thought about if you had have met someone else, or if you hadn't met anyone, what your life would have been like? Because it would have been different.
I wondered that, when I was single and I changed jobs in radio. I went from one radio station to another. Had I not gone to that second radio station, I wouldn't have met my husband, because that was part of all that scene. But I used to, when I was in my 20s, thinking, oh my gosh, am I ever going to get married? Is anyone going to want me? And you do think these things. And I used to look up at the sky at night when there was a full moon. I'd go, somewhere out there, my future husband is looking at that full moon too. I wonder who it is.
You wouldn't have been the only one doing that.
Yeah. Who is he? Where is he? And who's he with now? And how's he going to come to be in my world? And all of those things. But I thought, what if I don't meet anyone? What if I end up not having kids? That could be my life.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't want that. I mean, I always wanted to have kids. So, and as it turned out, I was very blessed. But it's interesting how your life takes that turn, and you think, how would it have been different had something else happened?
And I think we've done that. I'll put my hand up. I would sometimes, as a younger man, I don't know if that's a blokey thing to do, and you'd look up the moon or whatever and think, yeah, someone that I'm going to meet is looking at exactly the same thing, thinking. So I didn't think it was going to be Kaylee. I didn't. Sorry.
What are you saying?
Oh, I'm not saying anything. Is there a what if though that I shouldn't say regret? Is there a what if that you still think about today though?
Oh gosh, I'm sure there are plenty of them. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, there is a what if an opportunity presented itself for me to have a relationship with someone who was sort of reasonably well known in this country, and I decided not to. And I thought, no, this doesn't feel right, and I didn't do it. But I wonder what my life would have looked like had I gone with that.
Yeah, yeah.
How different it would have been.
I know, professionally, I remember being offered a job. I went for a job. I must have been in my early 30s. And I know I'm wearing an Australian Open top today, not through coincidence, maybe through fate. And the job was with the Association of Tennis Professionals, the ATP. And I got down to the last three. And it had gone from, and I think we'd only just had our first little girl, and it went from being a job where I would be spending 6 weeks of the year away from home, and we could live with that. We thought, fantastic. Now, by the time it got down to the last three, that had extended to something like 17 weeks away, and that included Christmas and all those sort of things. And I thought, and it was sold, you'll be chatting with, and the names came out back in the day. It was like the Ivan Lendls and all that, and you'll be having to mix with those people. And I often thought, wow, I would have loved that role. That would have been a fantastic role.
Would that have been your dream role?
At the time, yeah. But my bigger dream was to spend time Christmases and not be that dad who...
The absent dad.
Oh, remember when we did this at Christmas time? Oh, no, Dad wasn't here. He was over in wherever. So I sabotaged my own fate in that sort of final interview where they ask you those ridiculous questions like how many letterboxes are there in London and, all those, all those.
Are you sure this was a job about tennis?
Look, I'd been through all those things, but then they ask you crazy questions to work out what's going on in your head. Yeah. But I didn't want to be that dad that didn't remember that Christmas, or I was on the tour when someone turned 4 or I missed a soccer match or something like that. So sometimes whether it's your conscience, whether it's your self-belief in what you want to do and where you want to go and where you want to head that takes a hold. And does that all sort of come together in your life choices as well and say fate has nothing behind it? Or is that fate actually helping you make those decisions?
Oh, look, it depends, I guess, on your beliefs.
Yeah.
What you believe in the the universe, God, the greater powers that be, whatever you believe in. But I think I'm a big believer in assessing all of those opportunities as they come along and look at, okay, why has this happened to me now? So I think, a few years ago, we're talking about professionally. A few years ago, I found myself not with a lot of work, and I needed a job pretty badly. And I thought to myself, what do I want to do? What do I really want to do? And I'd always wanted to drive buses. So I thought, well, I'm going to do that. And I went and got a job, and I drove buses for 6 or 8 months before another better paying job came along. And I am so glad I did that, because I loved it. I still love the idea of it. So that the experience and the people that I met, and I'm not talking about work colleagues so much as the passengers that I met and the people that I met, and what I learned about myself in that role was just fantastic. It's such a blessing, and all those different things that you do make you who you are today.
It's the people you meet, circumstance, and even doing this, think, wow, it's a little podcast. And the people I've come in contact with, I think that's fantastic. These situations I've never find myself in, and then through that, they give you the introduction, all those sort of networking things, and you don't call it networking at a certain age, it's just nice to meet people. Everyone is someone different. So that little change in my life has meant that I've got to meet some remarkable people with remarkable stories.
Yeah.
And I know in both of our careers in the media, you do get to meet some amazing people, but everyone is someone's brother, someone's sister, someone's neighbour, someone's uncle, and they're just regular people who go through all these things as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. Another one that pops into mind, I remember when I was in my 20s, a girlfriend of mine and I, we were talking about going travelling for 12 months like a lot of young Aussies do. And we had made a decision that that's what we were going to do. We started madly saving up money and had it all planned out where we were going to go and do the US and London and Europe and the whole thing. And we're going to be away for 12 months. And it was so exciting. And I thought, wow, this is great. And I thought I might end up living in London. I might end up working overseas somewhere. And about 3 months before we were due to leave, she told me she had met someone and she wouldn't be going anymore. And I was devastated, absolutely devastated. But now when I think about, had I done that, where would I be today? I could be anywhere in the world doing anything. And I didn't. I ended up staying here and went back to work, like knuckled down to work, and the career took off and away we go. So it's interesting, isn't it? You look back at those times and thought, wow, what if I'd done that?
Yeah, there's always some small decisions too that lead to bigger things as well. I don't know about you. I can't think anything off the top of my head which was like a relatively small decision, but it may be whether you go to a party or you go to, I really don't want to go out tonight and do such and such, and then you meet someone amazing or something incredible happens to you. Not the most pleasant of stories, but a friend of mine in their teens made that little snap decision that you do when you're a teen to, I'll get a lift with someone. And they got a lift with that particular person. And it was a wet night and the roads are a little bit slippery. Now, they survived the car accident, but it changed her life forever. A lot of plastic surgery, all those sort of things. But that little split decision of actually deciding, I will go with, Johnny instead of Mary, had changed her life forever.
And you and I and everybody listening too would make a million decisions like that every day.
That's right. Every
day.
Yeah. I think about some of the tragedies, it wasn't long ago, I think it was the 50th anniversary of the Granville train disaster.
Yeah.
People just making their annual commute, yet so many stories came that, I missed my train, or I decided I was going to take the later train that day or bus. They are real sliding door moments, aren't they, too?
Yeah. Well, I guess, and more recently, the air crash in India.
That's right.
that with one man surviving and all the other people on board didn't survive, and he's now joined a very exclusive club, would be questioning a lot of things, I would imagine, in life, that his road, what his life was like before that and what his life is going to be like now after that.
After the movie 11A comes out, or book 11A,
Yes,
I think that his life. But I think he lost a brother in that.
Yes.
In that tragedy as well. So his life will never ever be the same. And there's so many movies as well that sort of I mean, I don't know if you've got a favourite change. I mean, there's Sliding Doors, which is a very obvious one. I always used to love that movie with John Cusack and Kate Beckinsale called Serendipity.
Okay, I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, basically a movie where a guy meets a girl and he puts, I think she puts a note in the book or something, and then sells the book. And so they're meant to meet up if he happens to find that note in the book. And
I think most
Hollywood.
movies, if you think about it, most movies have a sliding door moment. I mean, you think about Grease. What if Sandy hadn't decided? She was going to be Sandra Dee, and and then all of a sudden she changed to to be with, what was his name in the movie? Danny. Sorry, gosh, can't believe I forgot that.
Danny Zuko. Where were you?
I know. Sorry, spur of the moment. And I'm thinking like Top Gun.
Yeah.
That was going one way, and then all of a sudden it's gone the other way. Just about Bambi. Every movie you think about.
There's one from left field.
Little Bambi, Mum gets shot and Bambi's on a different path. So think about it. Every movie has that where the people are on a path and it doesn't go according to plan. Otherwise, the movie would be as boring as the proverbial. Well,
I used to. I still like watching a movie with Robert Redford called The Natural. It's a baseball movie.
Yes.
And he's a pitcher.
Yeah.
And he meets a woman on a train. She ends up a little bit left of centre, shoots him. And so all of a sudden his life as a pitcher is gone, but he becomes, one of the great batters in the sort of game. So you're right.
Yeah.
Bambi, though. Wow.
Sorry, that was a bit depressing, wasn't it?
Wow.
What about Lion King? Perfect example of life not working out the way you thought it would.
Okay.
There's a whole other podcast in this.
Oh, no, you lead me down that path. Hey, listen, I'll finish up with this. If there was a chance to wake up in any town, any city, so as you could make that sort of fork in the road and say, oh, look, I tomorrow I'm going to just change my life, but I have control of that. Would there be anything that you would do, or would there just say, oh, I think I can just go on a holiday and let life take care of itself?
Yeah, no, I don't. I think I would just let go and let life show me where it wants me to be.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to do that, don't you?
Yeah.
I think it's
very deep and meaningful, aren't we?
Yeah, look, I think you should go and reacquaint yourself with Danny Zuko.
Yeah, or Bambi.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to do Bambi. Sorry, and we'll talk
Sorry,
again
John
soon.
Travolta.
We'll talk again soon.
Cheers.
Okay, bye.
The views and opinions expressed on the Big 6-0 are personal and reflect those of the hosts and guests. They do not represent the views or positions of any affiliated organisations or companies. This podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for guidance on any personal matters.
Oh, and before we go, let's give credit where credit is due. Kaylee Harris and I came up with all the genius content for this week's episode. Our producer, Nick Abood, well, he keeps the lights on and makes sure we don't accidentally upload a cat video instead of a podcast. So thanks for keeping us on track, Nick. Nick?